This analog trend is not new, and it's not going to last. We're pretty much already at the end of it, I would say, because the trend cycle is such that trends become popular, they hit like a very critical mass very quickly because the discourse is so fast, and then it just kind of peters out because everyone gets bored of it very quickly. The micro trend cycle that we exist in because of social media means that we don't have any patience. We just keep spiraling through things at absurd rates. And this analog trend, it's already gone through that entire cycle at this point. We had sort of the rise of it, I would say, at the end of 2025, when people were starting to get hopeful about new aspirations and a new them for 2026. As of the recording of this video, we are now 5 months into 2026. It's done. So why am I talking about it now? Well, because I want to raise a couple of things. The first thing is the fact that this analog trend itself was not really a new trend. It was just recycling a whole bunch of other trends that we've been having over the past few years, especially since COVID. And the second point that I want to raise is that we shouldn't really take too much stock in this sort of trend, but instead, if you genuinely feel the pull towards an analog lifestyle, you should just do that. Like, continue to do that and to not worry so much about this current trend cycle that we're in. I think a lot of this starts from the hipster subculture that came from the late 2000s and early 2010s. The older millennials in the audience would probably remember the hipsters. Essentially, hipsterism was the first time in this particular century that we had the aesthetic of old retro technology, as well as the cool kind of gentrified but also vintage looking cafes with the fancy food, the idea of going thrifting, wearing certain older fashion trends ironically, actually bringing back vinyl records as a physical media. All of those things essentially started off with the hipsters, but they were really derided by a certain percentage of the population because they were seen as caring so much about the aesthetic and had no substance. And yet the things that come to get mocked end up being accepted by the broader population. We essentially live in a world of the hipsters now. There's no point calling anything a hipster because everything is hipster right now. I could go on for a whole video about that, but I won't. The hipsters came and went, and we had a period of time for like the mid 2010s to the end of that decade whereby, certain elements from that subculture had become normalized. Vinyl records and interest in books, for example, was still continuing to rise a little bit. And then COVID happened. And since we had that pandemic lockdown era, the way in which technology has dramatically increased in everyone's life, TikTok is a big factor to all of this, but it's not the only factor to all of this. We have had this rapid succession of various different trends come in, which were all precursors to now what we have as being this analog trend. We had the rapid flurry of interest in adult coloring. We had the comeback of certain quote-unquote grandma hobbies like knitting and crochet and other kinds of craft hobbies. We had the continuing interest in vinyl records, which also came over to cassettes and now CDs, as CDs have finally reached the point of being old enough to be considered retro. And essentially, alongside all of this, we have reoccurring trends that are separate from media specifically, but are more about trying to decenter phones and technology and social media from our lives. This includes various trends around being more mindful, around reducing your screen time, monitoring your screen time, committing yourself to challenges whereby you're not engaging with your smartphone or with social media for a certain period of time. And each of these trends have come in quick succession since COVID, essentially one after the other, reaching a critical mass in 2025 when a lot of these trends coalesced into a broader macro trend, or maybe you could say a super trend. Maybe it's the Marvel Avengers of trends because it's, all of these things coming together as one. And that is the analog trend. And analog bags have already now been discussed to death, but it is a pretty good example of demonstrating exactly how this analog trend is just combining stuff we've already had. People are including journaling, coloring books, they're knitting into their analog bags, they're including their physical media players into their analog bags. If it's not, physical music media, classic iPods have come back as well. People are throwing those into their analog bags. And so, literally, it is just a bag that holds the other trends that we have been experiencing over the past few years. It's like, we can't just rehash or continue to exist with all of these little trends. We have to dress it all up with this unifying concept or statement of going analog or going offline. Now, as trends do, this is all going to fade away. People are probably going to give up on their analog bags if they were not already interested in them beforehand, and it will kind of go in the dumpster with all of the other bizarre trends that, have come and gone. And so you might get a bit pessimistic and think, well, then what's the point? If this is not going to lead to a broader change in how people relate to their own media, why should we care about the analog trend? And I think that skepticism is actually warranted. We should be skeptical about these kind of trends when they come up. I personally hold a level of skepticism towards it because of the fact I know that within the next few months, everyone's going to move on to a bajillion other things that have come up since. So this message is not really for the people that are particularly obsessed or holding on to that analog trend, because frankly, I don't think that we're that aligned anyway. If you're only interested in these sort of things because it's a trend or because you need to be spending less time on your phone but you don't know how to do it, I'm sorry, I don't think we're the same kind of person, and I don't mean that in a superiority or braggadocious way. I just mean that realistically. Because analog in some sort of form has been my life already this entire time. Yes, the trends have gone on, and I've been aware of the trends, but I have always lived to some extent some portion of the analog trend lifestyle. I never threw out my CDs from my early teenage years. I kept them. They never went away. I've had an interest in vinyl records and cassette tapes for years, and I have very slowly have built up tiny collections of those things, largely constricted due to money and space, which is fine. I'm happy with that. I have always been a fan of physical books. I mean, I will get to books in a moment. I know that this channel is about books, so I will get to that. But yeah, I've always been a reader who primarily is interested in reading on physical books, and I supplement that with ebooks because of convenience and to help fill in gaps in my collection, and that's also fine. And I still engage in crafts. No, I don't consider myself to be an artist or like a super creative, crafty person, but when I have the time and I have materials, I make cards for people and stuff like that. And so for me, it is very hard to relate to somebody who would only engage in this sort of activity as part of a trend or as part of a idea of, I need to decenter my phone and do something else. In the end, the more realistic way to keep going forward, if you're someone like me and parts of the analog lifestyle are already going to be your life, is you're never probably going to live the full aestheticized analog trendy life. You're not going to be the sort of person that will, completely log off of social media and never return ever in your life. Granted, if you are able to do that and it works for you, honestly, I'm proud of you. Like, if you manage to leave the internet entirely, first off, you're probably not even watching this video, but if that is you, then I hope you have the most wonderful, fulfilling life imaginable, and I am so proud of you. But if that's not your life and you cannot entirely leave the internet for whatever reason that is, or you don't want to leave the internet or the conveniences of modern technology, then it's quite obvious that what your life is going to look like going forward is that it's a mixture of both. You live a modern life with modern conveniences and with technology interspersed in it, because that is modern life. And also you have analog elements. And if you've already been engaging in these hobbies before the trend, that will continue. Don't feel like you have to engage in the entire spectrum of the analog trend. But if you have analog elements to your life, first off, that's probably a lot more sustainable and easy to commit to as a way to live your life, rather than changing everything dramatically. But also, you are authentically engaging in stuff that you like, and you're not just partaking in other things just for the sake of others. Additionally, I will say that digital tools can still supplement or can assist with aspects of living an analog life. For example, in regards to books, I obviously prefer to engage with physical books where possible, but as I mentioned earlier, I do use some ebooks. I'm actually quite a big fan of Project Gutenberg, which is very good for accessing ebooks for books that are out of print. And I think that's a very wonderful and lovely service, because I'm able to get access to lots of really classic pieces of literature without having to then go out and buy my own copies of them, but it is totally legal and an acceptable way to do that. So I'm fine with that, actually. It's a good way to supplement my book collection and to supplement my own reading hobby. So that's one way in which technology actually helps my analog life. The second way I'm actually doing this is that I'm now using digital technology in order to track and to actually keep a handle on the reading that I do in the real world. The reason why I've only started doing it this year is that a lot of the tools that exist for book tracking I honestly did not like at all. I very much do not like Goodreads, not necessarily because of Amazon, although I do have bones to pick with Amazon, but I just felt like Goodreads was way too complicated and there was too much going on for my brain, and I hated the website. I tried Storygraph, and a similar thing, like, yes, the UI looked quite different, and it was sort of a much more aesthetically nice looking operation with pretty stats and graphs and everything, but for me it was just way too much, and it was too much going on at once, and I didn't like it. So anyway, I ended up deciding on a new tool to track my reading. I use a simple book tracker called Croaks. I will probably do a video on it in the future where I talk about how I have been tracking my books in more detail. And I have found that it actually works for me in terms of a nice, simple tool that is digital. I can access it on my various devices, but it encourages me and supports me in being able to engage in the analog hobbies that I actually like. And unlike a platform like Goodreads, for example, it's not algorithm based and trying to suck me into just doing more screen time. I can actually track my books, give little updates, and then I can just move on with my life and return back to what I actually want to be doing. And it's great, honestly. It also helps me to realize the fact that as much as I would like to be reading on a daily basis, I actually don't, because I'm very bad at keeping up a reading streak for more than 2 days in a row. I will put my profile link in the description because it is public and you can see it. And on any given day that you look at that link, you're probably going to see my reading streak at being at just 1 or 2 most of the time, because I am currently bad at maintaining a consistent reading streak as much as I love reading. And so that is my pitch to those of you that are watching. Yes, the analog trend is not a new trend. It's probably going to go away soon, and it's a bit unrealistic for all of us to really uphold ourselves to. But if you were already somebody that was living some version of an analog life, or if you were already engaging in certain analog hobbies, then you can still live your life that way, and you can live a very good life that has balance and has things that you love and appreciate by incorporating analog elements into your digital life, or by including digital elements into your analog life and just enjoying the things that you like. And ultimately, isn't that the real reason why we're trying to do all of this in the first place? At least I hope so. Thank you all for watching this video. I appreciate you listening to what I have to say. And if you would like to hear more from me, well, you know where the buttons are down below. Thank you so much. And until next time, happy reading.